Welcome to a space where faith meets real life and growth gets uncomfortable. This isn't surface level motivation. It's truth that stretches you, challenges you, and asks you to show up differently. If you're ready to stop avoiding the work and start becoming who God's been calling you to be, stay.
There are moments when heaven schedules an interruption, when God marks a date not on your calendar, but on your destiny. And you can feel it in your spirit before you see it with your eyes. This is one of those moments. You didn't click on this message by accident. And you didn't wake up carrying that unusual sense of urgency for no reason. Something has been resisting you, pressing against your progress, delaying what you know God already promised. And tonight we are not negotiating with delay. We are not entertaining fear. And we are not pretending the blockage isn't real. We are stepping into a miracle moment where what was invisible is about to be confronted. And what was closed is about to respond to the authority God placed inside you. This is not a gentle prayer. This is not a casual whisper. This is an atomic prayer, the kind that shakes what cannot be seen, the kind that reaches into hidden places and forces doors to remember who authorized them to open. If you've been faithful but frustrated, obedient but exhausted, believing but bruised, then lean in, because this is the kind of word that meets you right at the edge of your breakthrough. When God sets a date, resistance loses its power, because resistance only works when it believes it has more time than your obedience. There are seasons when the enemy thrives on delay, not denial, because delay wears you down slowly, quietly convincing you that maybe the promise was symbolic, maybe the door was never meant for you, maybe you misunderstood what God said. But there comes a moment when heaven interrupts the waiting room and says, this has gone on long enough. A divine date is not random. It is not emotional. It is not based on how tired you are or how loud your prayers sound. A God-set date is anchored in alignment. It happens when your growth finally matches your prayer, when your capacity catches up to the weight of what you've been asking for. That is why resistance panics when God puts a timestamp on your breakthrough, because resistance knows how to handle vague hope, but it does not know how to survive divine precision. You may not have known the exact day when the blockage formed. It didn't announce itself. It slipped in through disappointment, through betrayal, through unanswered prayers that stacked up year after year. It hid behind logic and called itself realism. It disguised itself as wisdom and told you to stop expecting too much. And slowly, without you realizing it, doors that once felt possible began to feel heavy. You pushed harder, prayed longer, fasted deeper, yet something unseen kept pushing back. That is the nature of invisible resistance. It doesn't fight you in obvious ways. It drains your confidence, dulls your expectation, and tries to convince you that what you're experiencing is normal. But tonight, God is naming it. And once something is named, it can no longer hide. When God sets a date, He is not reacting to your frustration. He is responding to your faithfulness. Every time you kept showing up while feeling blocked, every time you worshiped while feeling stuck, every time you chose obedience even when progress was slow, you were building pressure in the spirit, and pressure always precedes release. Atomic prayer is not about volume. It is about concentration. It is the kind of prayer that brings everything you believe, everything you know about God's character, and everything you've endured into one focused declaration. It is prayer that refuses to wander. It doesn't ramble. It doesn't beg. It stands firm and says this situation has exceeded its permitted timeline. Resistance loses its power when it realizes you are no longer confused about who you are or what God said. Confusion gives resistance room to negotiate. Authority shuts that conversation down. And authority doesn't come from position or title. It comes from intimacy. It comes from knowing God well enough to recognize when He's saying now. There is a difference between praying someday prayers and now prayers. Someday prayers are hopeful. Now prayers are bold. Someday prayers ask if it's possible. Now prayers declare that it's time. And tonight is not about someday. Tonight is about alignment with a moment heaven already approved. You've been asking God why it feels like you're knocking on doors that don't respond. But what you didn't realize is that some doors are not opened by knocking. They are opened by command. Knocking is for unfamiliar places. Command is for territory you've been authorized to access. And authorization doesn't mean it will be easy. It means it will be effective. The moment you stop questioning whether you're allowed to ask for more is the moment resistance starts losing leverage, because resistance feeds on hesitation. It grows stronger when you shrink your expectations to protect your heart. God setting a date means the waiting has done its work. It means you have learned what you needed to learn, healed what needed healing, and strengthened what needed strengthening. The delay was not punishment. It was preparation. And now preparation has met permission. When those two collide, resistance has no legal ground to stand on. That is why this prayer is not timid. It is not uncertain. It does not apologize for taking up space. It speaks directly to what has been blocking your progress and reminds it that its season is over. This is the kind of moment where you don't just pray for open doors, you pray for clarity, for courage, for the strength to walk through what opens without second guessing yourself. Because sometimes the hardest part is not getting the door to open, it's believing you deserve to walk through it. Tonight, God is not only removing resistance, He is restoring your confidence. He is reminding you that if He brought you this far, He did not do it to abandon you at the threshold. He set this date because heaven already decided that what was invisible no longer has permission to remain hidden. What was closed no longer has authority to stay shut. Invisible blockages are not permanent verdicts, even though they often feel like silent judgments passed against your future. They make you question yourself in private, wondering if you miss God, if you delayed too long, if you somehow disqualified yourself without realizing it. The danger of an invisible blockage is not just that it stops movement, but that it tries to rewrite your interpretation of reality. It whispers that this is just how life is going to be, that some people move forward while others learn to cope. But God never designed your destiny to be managed by unseen resistance. What He allows for a season is never meant to rule you forever. Invisible blockages thrive in ambiguity. They prefer you unsure, half believing, constantly analyzing instead of standing. They show up as confusion when you should have clarity, fatigue when you should have fire, hesitation when you should have confidence. You're doing all the right things on the outside, but something on the inside keeps feeling restrained. That does not mean you are weak. It means you are aware. Discernment often feels like frustration before it feels like power. And the very fact that you can sense something is off is proof that God is inviting you into a deeper level of authority. A permanent verdict comes with finality. It closes conversation. It removes hope. But invisible blockages never carry heaven's signature. They operate on borrowed time, exploiting moments when you are tired, grieving, or transitioning. God does not issue verdicts in silence. When He decides something is over, He announces it with revelation, with alignment, with peace that doesn't make sense. If what you are experiencing produces fear, heaviness, and shrinking expectations, it did not come from Him. Many people mistake delay for denial because they interpret God through their pain instead of interpreting their pain through God. Invisible blockages convince you that unanswered prayers mean unanswered calling. But God is not intimidated by complexity. He is not confused by hidden resistance. What feels invisible to you is fully visible to Him. Nothing blocking you escaped His attention. Nothing slowing you down surprised Him. And nothing resisting you has more authority than His word over your life. The reason invisible blockages feel permanent is because they are rarely confronted directly. We pray around them, over them, through them, but we don't name them. We spiritualize endurance and call it maturity, when sometimes God is asking for confrontation, not tolerance. There is a time to wait patiently, and there is a time to stand firmly and say, this does not belong here anymore. Discernment tells you which season you're in. And tonight is not a season of quiet endurance. It is a season of holy interruption. God does not allow you to see what you cannot survive. If He is revealing the blockage, it is because He is also releasing the strength to remove it. Revelation is never cruel. It is merciful. It pulls back the curtain not to overwhelm you, but to empower you. Invisible blockages lose their power the moment they are exposed to truth. Light doesn't negotiate with darkness. It replaces it. And the same prayer life that sustained you through confusion is now being sharpened to bring clarity. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not paying for a mistake you can't remember making. Some things resisted you because they recognized what would happen if you ever moved freely. Some doors stayed shut because what's on the other side requires a version of you that is no longer afraid to take up space. God was not punishing you. He was preparing you to walk through the opening without shrinking, apologizing, or doubting yourself. Invisible blockages often collapse suddenly. One moment they feel immovable, and the next they dissolve under spiritual authority. That is because they were never built to stand truth. They survive on silence, on self-doubt, on exhaustion. They crumble when you speak with confidence, when you pray with alignment, when you stop asking for permission to want what God already promised. Authority is not loud, but it is decisive. It knows when enough is enough. This is why this prayer is not about convincing God to act. It is about agreeing with what He already decided. Heaven has not been debating your breakthrough. Heaven has been waiting for your agreement. When you align your words with His timing, invisible resistance loses its place. Not because you fought harder, but because you finally stood where God was already standing. And once you stand there, nothing unseen gets to tell you what is possible anymore. Prayer becomes atomic. When faith meets authority, because faith without authority hopes, but faith with authority commands. Many people pray believing God can do it, but atomic prayer is born when you know He already has. There is a shift that happens when prayer stops sounding like a request and starts moving like a decree. It's not arrogance, and it's not entitlement. It is alignment. It is the moment when your understanding of who God is collides with your understanding of who you are in Him. That collision releases power that does not beg resistance to move. It forces it to comply. Faith by itself believes in possibility. Authority understands permission. You can believe all day that a door could open, but authority knows whether you are authorized to walk through it. And when faith finally meets that authority, prayer stops circling the problem and goes straight to the root. Atomic prayer is focused, intentional, and uncompromising. It does not scatter energy across fear, doubt, and emotion. It concentrates truth until pressure builds. And pressure always produces movement. Many people were taught to pray softly about things God already gave them dominion over. They were told humility means hesitation, that boldness is dangerous, that certainty equals pride. But real humility agrees with God completely, even when that agreement makes you uncomfortable. Authority is not loud, but it is settled. It doesn't need to prove itself. It speaks once and expects response. When Jesus spoke, storms listened. Not because the storm respected volume, but because it recognized authority. Atomic prayer requires you to stop separating spirituality from responsibility. God releases power, but He expects posture. Faith says God can. Authority says God said. And when you pray from what God said instead of what you feel, your words carry weight. This is why some prayers feel exhausting. You're trying to generate power emotionally instead of releasing it spiritually. Atomic prayer doesn't strain, it aligns. It rests in truth and speaks from certainty. Invisible resistance trembles when faith and authority meet because resistance survives in gaps. It hides in the space between what you believe and what you declare. As long as your mouth is unsure, resistance feels safe. As long as your prayers sound optional, resistance negotiates. But when your faith matures into authority, prayer becomes direct. It names what is out of order. It corrects what is misaligned. It reminds the atmosphere who is in charge. Authority does not mean you control outcomes. It means you trust God enough to speak without fear of being wrong. Many people are afraid to pray boldly because they think unanswered prayer means failure. But prayer is not performance. It is partnership. Atomic prayer understands that God is responsible for the result, but you are responsible for the release. When you release the word, heaven backs it with power. Silence never produces movement, but agreement always does. Faith meets authority when you stop asking God to do what He empowered you to confront. There are things you should pray about, and there are things you should speak to. Jesus prayed all night, but he spoke to fig trees, storms, and demons. He prayed for alignment, but he commanded resistance. And you are not called to imitate his power without imitating his posture. Authority flows from intimacy. You cannot command what you have not first surrendered to. Atomic prayer is not emotional manipulation. It doesn't rise and fall with your mood. It is steady. It is rooted. It speaks the same truth whether you feel strong or weak. That consistency confuses resistance because resistance studies patterns. It watches for moments of fatigue, doubt, and discouragement.